So good day, everyone, and welcome to another session on case study research. For this session, we will focus our attention on the background of conducting case study research and to knowing more about scientific inquiry even before we talk about the stages of pursuing case study research. So we begin by deepening our understanding about scientific inquiry. You see, each day we ask questions. These questions may be in relation to ourselves and others. And although the types and the scope of our questions are limitless, okay, so the questions are united by one characteristic, and that is desire to find an answer. That's what basically is the focus of attention in the conduct of research. As humans, we are driven to know why things are, why things are as they are. Okay? And when confronted with a novel or new or complex situation or perplexing situation, it is but by instinct, okay, we ask these questions: who, what, when, where, and or why. Therefore, as we engage ourselves in answering these basic questions, okay, all of us are considered researchers. Okay, why? Because at its core, okay, research as a process basically is all about answering questions. Okay, we pointed that out several times. Now, from the time you were studying business research to the time when we focus on a more specific type of business research, that is feasibility study. In fact, one of the characteristics of research is its inquiry-based nature. Okay, so it is the core of what you do in research, the answering of questions. Okay, as you attempt to understand the world around us. Okay, so when you set up when you set about the task of finding answers to everyday questions, you are already conducting research. Okay, so formal research, like being done for a thesis, okay, just like what you are asked to do, okay, involves systematic actions that help you, the researchers, add credibility to the questions and answers engage, okay, in your research. So it involves finding patterns of irregularities in data, which in turn become tentative answers to questions that often form the basis for additional study. You see, sometimes answering these questions is not as easy as it looks for several reasons. Okay, so it is sometimes difficult because for one, as humans, we sometimes observe things in different ways or incorrectly. So we are talking about having different perspectives, or we perceive things incorrectly. Okay, so people observing the same event often relate the details of the event very differently. Okay, so reaching different conclusions about the causes of the event. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why answering question is not that easy. Second, we oftenly oversimplify things around us. Okay, by oversimplification, uh, we uh, we often reduce, okay, the questions, okay, to its essential elements, thereby missing rich details that characterize the true nature of the phenomenon. And thirdly, we sometimes encounter difficulty as we fail to recognize, okay, or account for variables that are influencing a situation under investigation. It is therefore very important that in undertaking research, we are well aware of what the variables are under study. Okay, so for example, okay, while concluding that a student's poor academic performance results from laziness, for example, we may fail to realize that the student has a learning disability, or a disruptive home life, or maybe lack of resources. Okay, just like in what we are experiencing now in times of pandemic, where there are different elements that also interfere, with the studies of students online, okay, or otherwise. Okay, so we have, for example, strong connectivity or poor connectivity, as the case may be. So these are negative influences that may also have interfered, okay, or intervened, or have influenced the classroom performance of the student. Okay, so to do better job of answering important questions, okay, we often apply research procedures, okay, in order to allow us to reach conclusions that are sensible. Number one, sensible. Number two, credible. And number three, interpretable. Okay, so always remember that we subject these questions that we have in mind in relation to the experiences or the events that we encounter in life, okay, by applying research procedures. And in this way, okay, we reach conclusions or generalizations that are, number one, sensible, number two, credible, and number three, interpretable. Okay, so what are these research procedures? So research, as a way of review, involves determining the following. Number one, what we want to study. Okay, I always have, in business research, pointed out the essence of having to begin the research process with the research question. What's the question? What's the problem? What's the issue? What we want to study? Okay, so that is fundamental, in the conduct of research. Secondly, how do we want to study it? And this now talks about the design, and this is already the methodology of it all. That's why methodology is an important aspect of the research process, because the design basically answers or provides details to how do we go about the process of research. Okay, so that's the design. Number three, whom we want to study. Will it be pertaining to a case? Okay, if it is a single case, or if will it be cases involving more than one in the case of multiple case studies, or sample in the case of survey or quantitative research. Number four, how best to acquire information. So remember that the data is the lifeblood of any research. I'd like to highlight that. Data is the lifeblood of any research undertaking. For without data, or without reliable and pertinent data, there can be no accurate and precise answers. So it is also essential that we, in the course of pursuing research, okay, take note of what the best technique we can employ in order for us to be able to acquire the right information, in order for us to be able to generate the best, how we can generate, how is the generation of information that will yield us the best result. Okay, so that's number four. Number five, how best to analyze or interpret the information that we acquire. And this will now pertain to analyzing the data. You see, analyzing the data is the process by which we now put meanings, okay, to the data that we have gathered. Okay, so it is very important to note that the type of analysis that we provide to a particular data will also, okay, determine, okay, the the quality, the extent or quality or of the data analysis that we provide. And then how and with whom to share our findings. Okay, remember that we do research because we want to contribute, contribute to the generation of knowledge for public use. Okay, so to whom do we intend the findings? Who shall, okay, be enjoying from the benefits or the yield of the study that we do? So that's also important. So if you are doing a case study, who do you think will benefit from a case study, or who in particular, what sector, okay, will be benefiting, from a case study research? And finally, how to confirm our findings. And this is all about validation. So this is where we now pursue verification in order for us to be able to arrive at the most accurate and precise results. Okay, so to accomplish this task, okay, involving research, okay, so you will note that researchers like you, okay, will need to devise a number of organizing frameworks. Okay, so organizing frameworks are very essential in the conduct of research tasks because they are elemental, okay, in the acquiring of answers to a question. So the framework establishes for the researcher the defining features and possibilities, okay, for acquiring answers to the questions that we raise, part of the research process. Okay, so an organizing framework, okay, is actually will serve actually as your roadmap. Okay, so a roadmap will establish for one, the possibilities for getting from one location to another. So it will help you, okay, identify how and where will you be going and how you will get there. Okay, so that is the work of an organizing framework. Okay, so a researcher, therefore, should not conduct a research project without an organizing framework. So it is always important that you have to identify an organizing framework that will establish, okay, for you, the researchers, the defining characteristics or the defining features and possibilities for acquiring answers to a research question. Okay, so so just a reminder, please mute your microphone. Thank you. Okay, so therefore, before conducting a research study, okay, you will need, to be familiar with the most significant organizing frameworks. We have studied this in the past. Okay, I would just like you to, I would like to walk you through, okay, at this point in time, these organizing frameworks. So most organizing frameworks are labeled by their essential attributes. Okay, so although the various frameworks are not mutually exclusive, okay, each one possesses its own fundamental characteristics. Okay, and one common organizing framework concerned with the generalization of research findings is the distinction between descriptive and inferential research. Okay, so let's begin with distinguishing what's a descriptive from inferential research. Okay, so you will recall that based on our previous lessons, the descriptive studies, okay, is where information is collected for the purpose of describing a specific group with no intention of going beyond that group. Okay, while inferential studies is where the desire goes beyond a specific group in order to make generalized statements about a larger population. Okay, so that's how we in general, okay, draw the line between a descriptive from inferential research. Okay, so another way to look at organizing framework involves the level of research experimentation. Okay, so we have on one hand, in line with experimentation through experimental research, and this type of experimentation is characterized by manipulation of an independent variable, okay, combined with random assignment of participants to groups. Okay, so that's number one. Okay, number two, we have alternative to true experimental designs are the so-called quasi or the pseudo experimental designs. Here, the variables are manipulated, but no random assignment of participant occurs. Remember that the delineation between the true experimental research and the quasi or pseudo experimental designs, okay, is randomization. Okay, randomization is the process of elimination of bias by ensuring that all the participants have equal chances of being part of the study. Then finally, we have the non-experimental designs. Okay, and this involves no variable manipulation and no random assignment. Okay, so these are the three designs, and this range in their ability to identify cause and effect relationships from very good to poor. Okay, that is, if you go for true experimental design, it's a very good way to identify cause and effect relationship, and conversely poor if dealing with non-experimental. Okay, so that's the second. The third is distinction between basic and applied. Okay, so the distinction between basic and applied research represents another organizing framework. So basic research involves the examination of variables in order to construct or verify a theory. Okay, so that is an explanation of a particular phenomenon. So we attempt, in the course of pursuing basic research, okay, to unravel, okay, the nature of a phenomenon or an event or an occurrence. Okay, so by contrast, okay, applied research is concerned primarily with addressing an existing problem or issue. Okay, so therefore, basic research is sometimes called theory-based research. Okay, based on the account of what basic research is. Okay, so it's theory-based for basic research, whereas applied research is sometimes called problem-based research. So do not forget that. If we talk about basic research, it's also referred to as theory-based research, while applied is also it's also identified as problem-based research. Okay, so although the thrust of these two approaches differ in reality, okay, so they overlap in that practical outcomes often result from basic research, while contributions to a theory often result from an applied research effort. Okay, so that's for applied versus basic. Now we have quantitative or qualitative. So although many research studies apply characteristics of both approaches, okay, so the principles and activities inherent in these two approaches allow researchers to plan and conduct their research in very different ways. Okay, so if you will try to distinguish which is which, most fundamentally, okay, quantitative research use numbers. Okay, so that's basic. Normally, okay, in the form of statistics to explain a phenomena. Whereas qualitative researches use words to describe trends or patterns in research designs. Okay, so that's how we distinguish quantitative from qualitative data. Okay, so these are the organizing frameworks, okay, that will help you, okay, in the conduct of the research process. Okay, so now we focus our attention, okay, on qualitative and quantitative research. So it is, as mentioned earlier, okay, particularly useful, no, for beginning researchers or for um, undergraduate researchers, okay, involving understanding the differences, okay, so between quantitative and qualitative. Okay. So there are varied ways, no, by which we can distinguish these two approaches. Okay, and let me, okay, in this particular segment of the discussion, point out on some and have it related to case studies. Okay, so we start with some basic discussions about quantitative and qualitative. Okay, so we have the following for basis of determining which will be employed for type of research. Okay, so we have on one hand, okay, time and resources. Okay, so if we, for example, talk about limited time and resources, okay, we may employ quantitative approach. Okay, we consider it as more appropriate. Take note, more appropriate, though it doesn't forbid us to uh, undertake qualitative. Okay, what may be more appropriate if time and resources are limited, no, is the quantitative approach or the counterpart of the qualitative. This is because quantitative research often involves instruments, okay, such as surveys and tests to measure specific variables. Okay, so that's how we try to uh, uh, maximize or optimally use the limited time and resources. Okay, so these instruments typically produce useful data in short time periods with reasonable investment of personnel and materials. Okay, in contrast, a qualitative approach may require individual interviews, okay, focus group discussions, okay, observations, a review of existing documents, or a number of these. So it is time consuming. Although these data sources would result in a wealth of rich information, considerable time and resources may be required to adequately represent the area being studied. Okay, so that's for time and resources. Second, if little is known about an issue, okay, so what then would be uh, the uh, the more appropriate? Okay, so if little is known about an issue, okay, a qualitative approach might be more useful. Okay, might be more useful. Whereas a typical quantitative research project identifies and investigates the impact of only a few variables. So qualitative research attempts to explore a host of factors that may be influencing a situation. Okay, so that will be if little is known about an issue. Okay, what about if access to people, no, who can participate in the research study is limited? Okay, so if access to people who can participate in the research study is limited, a quantitative approach may be preferred. Okay, so this is because quantitative research can often be accomplished with minimal involvement of participants. Okay, conversely, the individual interviews and focus groups inherent in qualitative research may slow one's research efforts if access to individuals is difficult. Okay, so that's for that's when access to people, okay, or participants in the research study is limited. And then if consumers of research findings prefer words to numbers, therefore qualitative approach may be best. So if your participants, okay, are more at ease with this telling stories, okay, so it's more of words than numbers, then you may go for qualitative. Okay, and then we have another factor affecting decisions to use qualitative quantitative approach involving the relationship of the researcher to those being studied. Okay, so relationship of the researcher and the one that you study. So in qualitative research, the goal is to understand the situation under investigation primarily from the participants and not the researcher's perspective. So if that is the case, okay, then we engage ourselves, okay, in qualitative research, okay, and where we try to look into the insider's perspective. Okay, so this is what we term as EMIC, EMIC, okay, EMIC, or referring to the perspective, okay, of the insider. Okay, insider meaning the people that you are studying. But if you are after the opposite, meaning the outsider's perspective, the outsider is referring to you, okay, you might engage in a process, okay, termed as ethic. Okay, so it's ETIC, ethic. All right, so that's how we explain, okay, choice of quantitative or qualitative approach involving relationship of the researcher to those being studied. So if it is EMIC, meaning it's focusing on the point of view of the insider, it's qualitative. But if the reverse or the opposite, it's quantitative. Okay, and finally, because the researcher is the primary instrument for data collection and analysis in qualitative research, okay, he or she must spend significant amounts of time in the environment of those being studied. So you immerse yourself, okay, for a long period of time, okay, studying the ways, the behavior, the culture of the people that you are studying in a qualitative study. In contrast, okay, a quantitative researcher often seeks to remain blind to the experimental conditions of the research. This is in order to maintain objectivity and to avoid influencing the variables under investigation. Okay, so clearly, qualitative and quantitative approaches to research differ in many ways. Okay, neither approach is right or wrong, although one approach may be more appropriate than the other. So that's depending on the nature of the research question and the predisposition of the researcher. Okay, so although the general characteristics of qualitative research are same, differences exist between specific types of qualitative research. Okay, so according to Creswell in 1998, okay, so we have the following types of qualitative research, okay, which are used, okay, in many disciplines. Okay, so we have the following. So please take note of this. We have the phenomenological studies. Okay, phenomenological studies. Then we have ethnographic researches. Ethnographic. We also have grounded theory qualitative research. We have biographical studies, and of course, we have case studies. So as you have learned it in the previous lessons, okay, case studies represent, okay, a type of qualitative research, okay, and they are different from other types, okay, in that they are intensive analysis and descriptions, okay. So this comparison, okay, which you have on this slide and the succeeding slide will point out to you, okay, the comparison of the general research traditions, okay. So you will see it from this matrix, okay, the summary of the characteristics of the three research traditions as quantitative, qualitative, and then we have case study as a qualitative study. Okay, so we start with researcher identifies topic or questions of interest and selects participants and arranges procedures that provide answers that are accepted with a predetermined degree of confidence. So it's where research questions are often stated in hypotheses that are accepted or rejected using statistical test and analysis. That's uh, for quantitative. For qualitative, identifies topics or questions of interest, collecting information from a variety of sources, often a participant observer, okay, and accepts the analytical task as one of discovering answers that emerge from information that is available as a result of the study. Okay. In more specific terms, a case study is where you identify a topic or question of interest, you determine appropriate unit to represent it, and define what is done based on careful analysis of multiple sources of information about the case. Okay, so then we have the second one. Okay, so we have in quantitative varying greatly from context being studied, while qualitative is designed to reflect as much as possible the natural ongoing context being investigated. And for case studies, it is defined by systematic series of steps that is designed to provide careful analysis of the case. And then we have this. Okay? So for information collection. In case study, it may last a few hours, a few days, a few months, or as long as it is necessary to adequately define the case. Okay, so it's dependent on defining the case, you know, for number of hours or the amount of time for information collection. And finally, for report of outcomes, for case study, it is generally narrative in nature. Okay, as what I have mentioned, it's qualitative, consisting of series of illustrative descriptions of key aspects of the case. And this is to distinguish it from a quantitative report that is consists of a series of statistical answers to questions under investigation. Okay, so that has to do with the comparison between qualitative and quantitative, and describing further case study as a type of qualitative qualitative research. Okay, so with that, we now can undertake further studies on the stages of doing or pursuing case study research. Okay, so we begin with setting the stage. So when we talk about case study, okay, we regard it as a form of research that represents a broad view. Okay, so it means conducting an empirical investigation of a contemporary phenomenon within its natural context using multiple sources of evidence. That's according to Yin in 2003. Allow me to break this down into simpler units of analysis just to bring us to a better or deepened realization of what case study is. So just like any other research study, it is based on data. Okay, an investigation, okay, that is dependent on data. That's what we mean by empirical. So it's based on observation, or it's based on actual data gathered. Okay, and this investigation or study, okay, which actually is a systematic and organized study, okay, involved, okay, or is involving or involves a contemporary phenomenon, meaning a present day, okay, or a uh, modern condition, a modern day condition within its natural context. Okay, so that is to rely on the multiplicity of the sources of evidence. Okay, so the topics of case study research vary widely. Okay, so for example, case studies may involve a program. It can also be an event. It can be a person. It can be processes, institutions, social groups, and other contemporary phenomena, okay, that have been completed. So if we apply it in business, we may be focusing on a program that's introduced in the operation of the business, or the operation of the business itself, and the different facets or phases of the operation of, or the business operation. Okay, so sometimes people use the term case study as a catch-all category, no, for research that is not a survey, okay, an observational study, or an experiment. So if the category, if the type of study is neither survey nor observational study, okay, or experiment, okay, and it's not statistical in nature, according to Merriam Webster Dictionary in 2001, it should be, okay, a case study. Okay, so in fact, researchers from many disciplines and many paradigms, okay, both qualitative and quantitative, they call their work case studies. Okay, and they generally agree on several important characteristics that define case study research. Okay, so what are these? Number one, so please take this down. Although the case study research sometimes focuses on an individual representative of a group, okay, more often it addresses a phenomenon. Okay, for example, okay, a particular event, okay, or a situation, or a program, or an activity. Okay, so that is for the first instance. Okay, so this phenomena represent the focus of most case studies, but are not mutually exclusive. Okay, meaning this phenomena, referring to event, situation, program, and activity, may not be independent of the other types. So it may be transecting, the different phenomena. Okay. Number two, the phenomenon being researched is studied in its natural context. Okay, so by studying it in its natural context, we take note of the fact that it is bound by space and time. Okay, so it is bound by space and time. Okay, so clearly, okay, context is important in case study research, and its benefits are a strength of doing intensive. That's why, by very definition, a case study is an in-depth, okay, analysis, okay, of an individual or group, as well as events, situations, programs, activities, and other phenomena of interest. Right? Number three, case study research is richly descriptive, okay, because it is grounded, in deep and varied sources of information, so that this will also distinguish or this will be a defining characteristic, okay, for case study compared with the other types. It employs, okay, quotes of key participants. It may also be based on anecdotes, okay, prose composed from interviews and other literary techniques to create mental images that bring to life the complexity of the many variables inherent in the phenomenon being studied. Okay, so that's for the third, okay, characteristic. So it is richly descriptive when we talk about case study. Right? So additional similarities and differences sometimes found in other forms of research also characterize case study research. For example, in contrast with experimental research, case study research is generally more exploratory than confirmatory, because confirmatory is what you do in experimentation. What you do in case study is just to provide, okay, a basic or initial study or understanding about a particular event or phenomenon. Okay, so the case study researcher normally seeks to identify themes or categories of behavior and events rather than prove, okay, which you do in confirmation or confirmatory research. Prove relationships or test hypotheses. Okay, so because it involves collecting and analyzing information from multiple sources such as interviews, observations, and existing documents. So case study research sometimes requires the researcher to spend more time in the environment being investigated than is the case with other types of research. Okay, and lastly, okay, as with most research, doing case studies creates opportunities for the researcher to explore additional questions by the act of investigating a topic in detail. Okay, so doing a case studies, okay, doing case studies means identifying a topic that lends itself to in-depth analysis, okay, in a natural context using multiple sources of information. And once the stage has been set, okay, we must determine what is known and not known about the topic to create an important research questions. So remember our discussion about research as to search again. Okay, that is to legitimize our work, that our study, that our research, that our case study is not a duplication nor replication. So we see to it that we engage ourselves in an extensive review of literature just for us to know what are known about the topic of interest or the phenomenon of interest, and what are yet, okay, what are not known yet about it, right? So that is very important, okay, in so far as case study is concerned, once we have already set the stage, okay, to conduct literature review. But before we proceed to knowing more about how to conduct literature review based on the discussions that we have had in the past, allow me to just focus your attention on this table that will represent the characteristics of case study and some data collection questions. Okay, so this was adopted from the work of Creswell in 1998 on qualitative inquiry and research design, choosing among 5 traditions. Okay, so we start with number 1 characteristic. Okay, so it is a bound case, okay, such as a process, activity, event, program, or multiple individuals is investigated. So relative to this, okay, we, in the attempt of defining the case, answer is posed with the question, what is studied? Okay. Number 2, a gatekeeper provides access to information and assistance in gaining confidence of participants. So a gatekeeper is someone who plays an important role in ensuring that the that the that the locus of the study, okay, is supportive, okay, or the participants of the study are supportive to the objective of the research and the researcher in order to elicit, okay, the pertinent data. So here in the establishment of access and rapport, okay, we ask the question, what are any concerns related to access and rapport? So there might be some restrictions in so far as gathering data in the actual organization or in the actual area is concerned. Okay. Next, a case or cases, no, an a typical case, okay, or a maximum variation or extreme case is defined. Okay, so relative to this, okay, we talk about sample with purpose, and we answer the question what sites or individuals are going to be studied. Then we have a collection of forms such as documents and records, interviews, observations, or physical artifacts is complied. Okay, this is in order to delimit the data. You see, as you go along with the study, you tend to gather as many data as you can. Okay, and we in the process of trying to determine the scope, okay, and limitations for a study, we focus on what types of information will be collected. Then a variety of approaches, for example, field notes, interviews, and observations are used to gather data. Okay, so for record information, okay, we engage ourselves into how is information compiled. And then the last two concerns, okay, involves concerns may emerge related to intensive data gathering. So it's addressing field issues. So we answer the question, is data collection difficult? And lastly, for large amount of data, how is information is stored? Okay, so just to sum up the characteristics of case study and the data collection questions. Then we have for table number 3.2, okay, still on no, this one's for the commonly used procedures in case studies. So we have the following procedures. We have also on this on the second column, okay, how it is observed in a case study. All right. So we have intent, appropriate design, and how intent relates to research problems. Problem are defined. So the focus on developing an in-depth understanding of a case or bounded system. So it is related to understanding that an event, activity, process, or one or more individuals and the type of case, such as intrinsic, instrumental, or collective, is delimited. Okay. So number two, the plan to receive approval and gain access to study sites and participants is defined. So it is very important to gain the support, okay, of the participants. So approval from institutional review board is obtained. So at least insofar as UL is concerned, you have to get an approval from your college. A research site is located using purposeful sampling procedures, and number of cases is determined, and gatekeeper to provide access is identified. So you will need to have a focal person to help you out in the process of gathering the data, who you call gatekeeper. So data are collected emphasizing time in the field, multiple sources of information, and collaboration. So we have extensive information is gathered using multiple forms of data collection. Then we have data are analyzed and interpreted related to the design. So data are reviewed to develop an overall understanding. And finally, research report suitable for dissemination is prepared. Okay, so reporting focuses on describing the case with description, analysis, and interpretation addressed differently or equally. So decision is made to emphasize objective or subjective reporting, including biases and generalization to others. Okay, so these are the procedures commonly used in case study. Okay, so after taking note of all of this, we are now ready to determine what we know. So once you identify what you will investigate in your case study research, you should determine what is already known and not known about the topic by reviewing what has been written about it. Okay? So your purposes in reviewing literature are to establish the conceptual foundation for the study. That is to define and establish the importance of your research question in order for you to identify the strengths and weaknesses of models and designs that others have used to study it, and to identify the style and form used by experts to extend the knowledge base surrounding your questions. Okay, so examining existing literature helps researchers identify viable and important research questions or hypotheses. Okay, so that is to be remembered always. Okay, so examining existing literature helps you to identify viable and important research questions or hypotheses. Okay, so that's fundamental to reviewing literature. Number two, it is important to review literature because by reading existing materials or literature, it helps the researchers identify possible research designs and strategies for their own research efforts. Okay, so studying the literature helps you identify the strengths and weaknesses of models and designs that others have used before you. Okay, so that's why you need to review what have they done, what previous researchers have done, what models they have used, what are the strengths and the weaknesses of these models in order for you to be able to have an insight on what and how you will have to also employ in your own study. Okay, so this information, okay, that you gather in the process of literature review are valuable, okay, in planning your own research. Number three, reviewing literature, okay, will help you learn the formats and procedures for writing and communicating your own findings to others. Okay, so as a result of literature review, okay, you may realize that publications or of professional organizations produce most authoritative information. Okay, so identifying what is known and not known helps you learn the style and form used by experts to extend the knowledge base surrounding your topic. And then we have doing case study means determining what we know about a research question to establish its importance and the need for further research about it. Okay, to identify strengths and weaknesses of previous research and to identify areas of sufficient and insufficient study as well as methods used to study it. So once you have established the questions and the need for your study, you are ready to select a design to guide your research effort. But before you proceed to selecting the design, here are some tips according to Galvan in 1999. This provides a straightforward guide for use in writing literature reviews and includes some key directions. So in the question how to do a literature review, this outline presentation will be very handy, okay, and helpful to all of you. Okay, so allow me to begin with selecting a topic and identify literature to review. So that's where we start. That's where we begin. We identify appropriate databases, so you know where to find these materials from. I already have given you some tips before, like you Google it up, you go to Google Scholar, you go to professional sites, and I will be also again, okay, sending the link for you a library so that you can have access to the online materials. Review recent literature first and work backward, and then define what is known and what is not known as quickly as possible. So you need to know first what are known, and then what are not known, that will be the focus of your study. Number two, analyze the literature. So use consistent form for summarizing articles. I don't know if you can still recall that annotation activity. If not, then we will have you for a sort of similar study, okay, in order for you to look for strengths and weaknesses of different literature and identify gaps in what is known. And then we criticize the results. So by criticizing the literature, criticize the literature. So by criticizing the literature, you will need to summarize nature of the research. For example, quantitative or qualitative theory or practice, and then identify who participated and how variables were measured. Then finally, identify limitations to be addressed in efforts to strengthen your research. Then the last, okay, two, okay, synthesize the literature, okay. By synthesizing the literature, we avoid note card presentation and strive to represent an integrated body of knowledge. So we do not just describe what the different materials are, okay, and we do more than that. We use headings to organize your presentation, and we introduce and summarize each section of the review. And finally, we document the literature. We move from very general to very specific representations of what is known. We explain inconsistencies, and we use tables to compare, contrast, and summarize bodies of knowledge. So this is how we do the literature review. Okay. So that will be preliminary to the different topic of discussions that I have assigned to each group. We begin with selecting the design. So the next meeting, we shall have the first 2 or 3, as the case may be. Do not fail to be delivering or rendering your report as scheduled, because we will be accommodating those who are present by then to take over, to take your place. Okay, so that will be all for this afternoon sessions. Thank you, everyone.